Welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to share this one with you today because we are tackling one of the most massive, profound questions of human existence, free will and moral responsibility. But we're doing it through a beautifully unique visual lens. Imagine with me a soft, warm, cartoon, paper-cut world. And right in the center of it is our main character, a tiny, completely innocent little kitten named JoJo. But, JoJo's story isn't exactly your typical fairy tale. You see that imposing figure standing over him? That is Joe the First. He's a ruthless dictator dog who rules his kingdom with an iron paw. So, JoJo the kitten is raised by this cruel dog. He never sees any kindness, he only experiences violence, strict obedience, and the absolute, terrifying power of his adoptive father. And as he grows up in this little paper-cut world, JoJo absorbs all of that. He actually adopts those exact same values and grows up to be a tyrannical dictator cat himself. Today, we're going to use this little kitten's journey to explore how we, as human beings, judge past experiences, trauma, and ultimate accountability.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is the ultimate dilemma we have to face. When JoJo grows up into an adult cat and starts throwing innocent woodland creatures into the dungeon, do we hold him morally responsible? It's a genuinely tough question. On the one hand, he is doing terrible things. He isn't acting accidentally, he is actively choosing to be incredibly cruel. But on the other hand, he was raised by a dictator dog in a highly isolated castle. This is quite literally all he has ever known. This exact scenario is actually based on a famous philosophical thought experiment by Susan Wolf, which was designed to test our gut intuitions about blame. So I want you to actively judge this cat as we go through this explainer together. Is he a monster who deserves punishment, or is he a victim of his upbringing who just deserves our pity?
To start answering that, we have to look at a major theory in philosophy known as the deep self view. Developed by philosophers like Harry Frankfurt and Gary Watson, this view essentially says that you are responsible for your actions if they align with your deep self. Okay, so what does that actually mean? Well, it means the kitten isn't just acting on some random, fleeting impulse. He doesn't feel bad about his cruelty. When he reflects on his actions, he actually endorses them. He actively wants to be a ruthless dictator. Because his actions stem from his true, endorsed values, Frankfurt and Watson would argue that this paper-cut cat is fully, 100% morally responsible for his tyranny. He has zero excuses because he is doing exactly what he genuinely wants to do. But hold on a second. Philosopher Susan Wolf looks at that exact conclusion and says, not so fast. She counters the deep self view with her own theory, the sanity condition. Wolf argues that sure, even though the cat's actions reflect his deep self, we have to ask how that deep self was formed in the first place. Because of his warped upbringing by that dictator dog, Wolf argues the kitten suffers from a moral incompetence. He is insane in a very specific philosophical sense, meaning he completely lacks the cognitive and normative ability to even understand right from wrong. He simply never had the opportunity to learn it. Therefore, according to Wolf, you really cannot fully blame the cat. His environment basically broke his moral compass before he even figured out how to use it. And this brilliantly illustrates what modern psychology tells us about childhood adversity. If we look at a timeline of development, drawing directly from the research of Philip Robbins at the University of Missouri, at 0 months, we have a totally innocent kitten on a natural, healthy track of development. But right around 6 months, the trauma and abuse of being raised by the dictator dog act as what Robbins calls a deformative experience, and literally deforms the kitten's development, yanking him off that natural path and pushing him onto an alternative track of antisociality by 12 months. Robbins' research highlights the people, or, paper-cut cats in our case, who don't experience severe trauma typically just do not develop these strong antisocial tendencies. The environment actively reshaped his entire moral development.
So how do we judge him? Well, we can actually look at real statistical data from that University of Missouri study, which involved nearly 250 participants. Imagine a jury made up of woodland animals judging our dictator cat. The study reveals this completely fascinating phenomenon called asymmetric sensitivity. When the jury sees the cat do something bad, they place less blame on his character and way more blame on his traumatic upbringing by the dog. But, and here's the asymmetric part, if the cat with a traumatic past somehow manages to do something good, the jury praises him far more than they would a normal act. They view the good act as a true reflection of who he really is deep down, finally overcoming his terrible environment. We're just naturally wired to use childhood adversity as a lens that filters our moral judgments, maximizing our empathy.
Let's zoom out to the societal level for a minute and see how this builds into an entirely different realm, how a society formally categorizes this kind of behavior. Philosopher Sam Wilkinson introduces a concept called psychiatric fictionalism. When the cat acts out, society has to slap a label on him. Is he just a naughty cat making bad choices? Or does he have a medical condition, like antisocial personality disorder? Wilkinson argues that these psychiatric labels are not necessarily hard, objective properties in the physical world, like having blue eyes or a broken leg. Instead, they are highly useful, indispensable fictions or narratives. The label we choose entirely dictates how the rest of the paper-cut animal kingdom is going to react to them.
Now, what's really interesting here is a compelling idea from philosopher Craig Edwards. Just picture our wise, paper-cut owl delivering this message to the forest. Mental illness is not a label that picks out a set of consistent qualities. It is a label that stipulates how people should respond morally or medically. Think about that for a second. If the woodland creatures label the cat as naughty or evil, the response is moral. They punish him, they banish him. But if they label his behavior as a disorder resulting from his brutal upbringing, the response becomes medical and compassionate. They try to rehabilitate him. The boundary between a moral failing and a medical issue isn't always some objective line drawn in the sand. It's a societal boundary that we constantly negotiate to figure out the most humane way to respond.
But here we run into a major problem. If we just label the cat as completely sick and blame everything on the dictator dog, we strip the cat of his agency. He just becomes a helpless victim who can never, ever change. And that brings us to a vital middle ground, a clinical framework proposed by Hannah Pickard called responsibility without blame. Pickard argues for this incredibly crucial balance. We must hold the cat responsible for his actions because acknowledging his agency is quite literally the only way to empower him to change his future. However, we must completely drop the hostile, emotional blame and punishment that usually tags along with it. We hold him responsible, sure, but with profound empathy, acknowledging that society, the whole animal kingdom, has a massive role to play in helping him heal from those deformative early experiences.
So, the crucial point is that this whole story of a paper-cut kitten is actually the battleground for one of the oldest philosophical debates in human history. On one side, we have hard determinism. This is the view that the kitten's environment, his biology, and the dictator dog determined absolutely everything. He never had a choice, and moral responsibility is just a complete illusion. On the exact opposite side, we have libertarianism. This is the view that despite his terrible upbringing, the cat is a free agent, the ultimate author of his own actions, and therefore fully accountable. Literally everything we've discussed today, the deep self, the sanity condition, deformative experiences, psychiatric labels, is really just us trying to find exactly where we stand between these two extreme poles.
Which brings us to a final thought I want to leave directly with you. We can look at JoJo the cat, raised in the shadow of a tyrant, and easily see how his past completely deformed his moral compass. We can easily extend our empathy to him in this little cartoon world. But what about you and me? Every single one of us is shaped by environments, parents, and early experiences that we simply did not choose. If the kitten's past writes its future, are any of us truly, completely the authors of our own destiny? Are we ever completely free? Think about that the next time you rush to judge someone's actions. Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating paper-cut world with me today, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.
Knowledge grows through sharing. What are your thoughts on today's topic? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe as we continue to grow together.